Theodore Roosevelt once famously said, when they call the roll in the Senate, the senators don't know whether to answer present or not guilty. So, playlisters, pour yourself a glass because we're bringing you into our political group chat about politics and the next generation of leaders in this country. This is Political Playlist Happy Hour.
Welcome to Political Playlist.
All right, are we ready, guys?
Happy Hour.
Happy hour.
We fucked that up so bad.
Hey, everybody, and welcome to Political Playlist Happy Hour. I'm Michael Kristoff.
Amanda Muskie Goldwyn.
And we have a great happy hour for you today because we are diving into the Senate. And we are talking about 9 key upcoming races that are ultimately going to determine who controls the Senate come January. But first, Anna, welcome back to LA.
Thank you. I had a nice
Good
little
to-
vacation. Do I look tan?
Good to have you back. You do, actually. Yeah, I got to say, you look tan. Yeah,
That was
you look
the goal.
tan and refreshed. You just have that
And you're
Block
about-
Island glow.
You're about to go on vacation, so
I am. Yes.
But you burn. You're not really
I'm doing the Irishcation, which is where you sit on a beach under an umbrella covered in sunscreen and somehow still get sunburned.
I will say, like,
Yeah.
I did spend a little bit too much time in the sun because I don't really get super burned, but like the aftermath sometimes is a week later, I'll have a little bit of like heat rash, you know, kind of just like itchy, like bumpy. And so I am sort of a little bit regretful because I have some like itchy arms, but
Yeah.
worth it.
Over the weekend, I was at a pool and somehow I
Brag.
missed, like, I have a diamond shaped sunburn at the center.
was
I look
laying
like
on your
Iron Man.
chest?
I forgot to, like, somehow literally in the
Oh.
center of my chest, I forgot to get sun spray.
Oh,
or
God.
I must have missed it with sun spray, but sun spray. That's not a
Sun spray?
thing.
What are you talking-
Sunscreen, like sunscreen spray. And so literally, I have like a perfect diamond sunburn, and I
That's
look
like a
like I have the
superhero.
Iron Man thing.
Yeah. Wow.
Um,
Cool.
Yeah. Well,
Sick.
also over the weekend, a few very, very surprising, startling, sad developments as it relates to the Senate took place. Anna, do you want to kind of lead us off with some of the breaking news before we get into like some of the actual races and what?
I mean, the breaking news, Lindsey Graham died, which I
Yeah.
will say, like, so you know when people send email, especially political emails, where it's like a misleading subject line and they're
Yes.
like, I wrote that to make you click on the email kind of
Right.
a thing. So I woke up yesterday, Monday morning. Wait, is today Monday or Tuesday?
Today is Monday.
Today's Monday, but this will come out on Tuesday. So I woke up on Sunday morning
Yeah.
and I was like looking at my emails and I saw an email from this like political group that was like Lindsey Graham died or whatever the subject line was. And the first thing that went through my mind was like, oh, that's such a clickbaity subject line.
Like Lindsey Graham died in the polls over the
Yeah,
weekend.
exactly.
We're out raising the shit. And,
That's-
yeah.
That's
Literally.
100% what I
Oh,
thought it was going to
man.
be. And
Oh.
so for about 2 hours, you know, I do
Yeah.
try to like, especially on the weekends, not like be on my phone a lot in the morning. And so for like 2 hours, I wasn't on my phone. And I was like, oh, that was such an annoying subject line of an email, like just to
Yeah.
try to get me to click on it. And then someone texted me actually, oh my God, Lindsey Graham died. And I was like, oh, that wasn't clickbait. That was
Yeah.
actually the truth. So that is the big breaking news, I would say.
Yeah. And, you know, I think like obviously, you know, very sad. Just you never want to see anybody die suddenly. Sounded like he had a aortic aneurysm.
Tear.
Yeah, which you know, that is a rough way to go. And you know, I think I thought Adam Kinzinger had a really good post about this.
Of course
Where
you did. Your favorite, man.
Kinsey, we love you, buddy. But you know, he posted a photo of him and Lindsey Graham. They looked like they were on some sort of, you know, overseas trip. Kind of looked like it was in the Middle East somewhere. And, you know, he was really candid in his post. He was like, I have known, you know, he was one of the first senators to, you know, reach out when I was in Congress, and we went on a lot of foreign trips together as both military veterans. And, you know, he was like, he was really, you know, a really good guy. And candidly, we really diverted our paths and ultimate friendships over Jan 6 and subsequent Trump stuff. And he was like, I'm not going to rewrite history and say that like we didn't stop speaking over this. And he was like, I'm going to choose to remember the Lindsey before Trump and who I knew and respected and all that. And I thought, that was a really like nice way to put what is a very complex legacy for Lindsey Graham, I think. Nobody questions his political adroitness. Nobody questions his service to the country. He was a senator since 2002 and I think a congressman before that. And obviously served in the military. He was a lawyer in the Air Force. And, I think like that all is commendable. And I think also there are a lot of people who have some real grievances with him and take issue with a lot of the things that he did later under the Trump administration and the seeming about face that he did on a lot of things that he previously was outspoken about. So, a complicated legacy, no doubt.
Yeah, I think like the one of the main things that kept coming up is that he was sort of a protege of John McCain. And you I think our generation, obviously, we know McCain from the 2008 election. And then I would say if you're politically engaged, probably from his vote on the Affordable Care Act.
Yep. Yep.
And, just his ability to be staunch in his conservative beliefs, but also seemed to be someone who obviously was widely respected. And what's interesting about Lindsey Graham is I mean, I feel like I didn't know that much about him, other than like that he was this, very powerful politician and had been in the Senate for a long time. But when you see sort of pieces on the news or stuff that's coming up on social media talking about, how he grew up, that he adopted his sister because like his parents,
Right.
there's all these like really interesting things in his past, his
And
military
he grew up in a
service,
pool
as you
hall.
said.
His
Yeah,
parents
like,
owned like a bar and pool hall.
and
Yeah,
just
which
stuff
is
that
so
you're kind of like,
interesting.
oh, I
Yeah.
get that there was a version of this guy who, had his conservative values, but also valued people across the political spectrum and seemed to work in a very bipartisan way for a lot of his career. And then it's just one of these fucking stories where like the Trumpness of it all kind of derailed it. And, Anthony had posted this thing from People magazine that was like such a troll,
Oh,
where it was like
yeah.
a
I
quote from
saw
Lindsey
that.
Graham in 2015 about Trump. And then, like 5 years later after January 6th defending Trump. And I just think that, I don't know, I find it difficult because as we've been older people and, in our adulthood in the Trump years, as a person who very much disagrees with Trump and thinks that he's done things that are not great for our country, but also wants to respect Republicans who have done things that are great for our country, I find Lindsey Graham to be a really difficult figure to be commendable because
Yeah.
it seems like he had this ability that we crave sometimes in politicians, which is that like John McCain-ness, I guess, and that it just went out the window because I think he saw that in order to execute his agenda, which to his credit was a very specific foreign policy agenda that he had been building for decades, in
Mhm.
order to see those things through, that I do think he genuinely believed he had to cozy to Trump. And he did so successfully. But I guess the question is like, at what cost to, the better side of politics that I think we're missing so much right now.
And I will add to that I think the thing that really frustrates me and I think frustrates a lot of people who follow politics or maybe don't closely follow politics, but all these people who are coming out and saying, wow, behind the scenes, he was such a like witty, nice, fun guy. He was, always there to sort of
We don't want behind the scenes.
and exactly. And it frustrates me and it pisses me off that it's like, okay, why are you doing that behind the scenes and then being some other person
I mean, I
in
think a
front of
lot
the
of them
scenes?
do,
And
right? Like,
a lot of them do, but it just speaks, I think, to the cravenness of his will want and need or desire to retain that power, right?
Mhm.
I think when that People magazine quote, to go back to that for a sec, and the things he said about Trump leading up to the 2016 election, I think that's exactly how he felt. And I think when you play the clip, that's how Marco Rubio feels. That's
Mhm.
how JD Vance feels. That's how Ted Cruz, the list goes on and on. And then now what you're seeing is the charade. Now it's the role play to retain that power. And, you know, now I think, he was probably a shoo-in for the South Carolina race. Now that's going to be
Yeah, so let's
a
talk about
whole
that.
different
What's going on there?
ball game. Yeah. Um, and I think, like, just to set this up for folks, there's really about 9 key toss-up and some reach races that are coming up for this upcoming midterm that is really gonna determine who controls the Senate. Right now, it's 53 Republican, 47 Democrat, plus the 2 independents who caucus with Democrats. So really, Republican or Democrats need 4
Mhm.
grabs, right? And now with South Carolina potentially up for grabs, that is a new wrinkle in this. But the states we want to focus on and talk about: Maine, North Carolina, Michigan, Ohio, Alaska, Georgia, New Hampshire, Iowa, Texas.
Can I say one more thing about South Carolina before we move on?
Yes, yes, yes.
Well, I will say that the Democratic candidate there is interesting. She's a pediatrician, a doctor, Annie Andrews, and I think that she was actually kind of giving Lindsey Graham room for his money. I think you're 100% right that he would have won. But what's interesting now is like, who is that viable candidate that's going to
Right.
replace Graham that can maybe have as much um, probability as he would have? And I saw two things came up. One is the funny one, and then one's the serious one. The funny one is that
I hope it has to do
apparently
with Nancy Mace.
it does.
Oh, fantastic. Lay it on me.
And then we'll move on to the other races. But like, so Nancy Mace apparently was like putting herself forward as the person to be named by the governor as the replacement for Lindsey Graham's seat, which now we all know has been taken by his sister, which I will say I think is like kind of a nice thing,
Yeah,
and it's
that's a
what
nice
Trump wanted and whatever. But like,
Mhm.
but apparently like all of these Trump officials, like they just hate Nancy Mace, which I just think is so
Yeah.
like it's just
It's
such
so
a
perfect.
karmic,
It's
it's
so
such a karmic
perfect.
thing
Right.
because I think she was on this like not independent, but like different kind of path. But then she
Yeah.
tried to kind of ingratiate herself to Trump and it just didn't work. So anyway, she has gotten all this negative reaction because she tried to push herself to replace him in the appointing of the seat until the next election. And there was this quote where it said, one top official with Trump's political operation told Axios, if Mace ends up in a runoff, we'll drop $2 million on her head to keep her out.
That's great.
But then the
That's
more
great.
serious thing is that someone that we cover, Russell Fry, who's a young politician from South Carolina and a very
Yeah.
safe Republican seat, who's a very big Trump ally, that he's actually one of the favored potential GOP candidates heading into this primary.
And to add on Russell Fry, he is the co-chair, along with Morgan McGarvey, of the House Bourbon Caucus.
Is he? Wait, but he's not from Kentucky.
I know, but I think he's just on the bourbon. I think he's the
He just loves
Republican.
bourbon.
I mean, if I think I have
Are
this
you
right.
sure? They
Yeah,
don't make bourbon in South Carolina.
I know, but I thought that
Okay,
he
well,
was.
Michael's fact checking himself. I just wanted to throw out one other quick thing when we're talking about death, which is that everyone also probably saw the appearance of Mitch McConnell in the hospital with his wife by his bedside. He apparently fell, briefly went unconscious, and now has been disappeared for a month, but is apparently still alive. And with complications that I won't go into here, but you can look them up if you're interested. If Mitch McConnell happened to pass away before August 3rd, there would be a pretty crazy political situation unfolding in Kentucky to replace his seat, because in Kentucky, there's a law where the governor does not appoint a new senator which is the case in most states. But they're actually special elections. So it would be this crazy thing of like a special election heading into a general election. So, some further repercussions of potential dead old
Yeah.
senators. But
Also, I was totally wrong. You were right.
I could've
Russell
told you
Fry
that.
was not the. It's Andy Barr. Yeah.
Well, Andy Barr is the favored is the GOP nominee for Senate in
McConnell.
Kentucky,
Right.
and despite Kentucky having a Democratic governor, and Andy Beshear, it's probably going to be a Republican seat in the Senate.
Yeah.
And so Andy Barr, co-chair of the Bourbon Caucus, to correct Michael's grave mistake, will probably be the next senator from Kentucky to replace Mitch McConnell.
Right. Okay, let's
So
start
let's
with
move on.
Maine. Let's go
Okay.
to Maine.
Ooh, spicy.
I want to start with Maine because I want to ask you a question as it
How do I
relates
feel
to
about Graham Plattner?
yeah, and time go. So obviously Graham Plattner is out. They had until I think it was August 12th to get him to drop out. Otherwise, he had to be on the ballot. And apparently, the reporting was that Republicans had more dirt that they were going to wait to drop on him until after
Fucking
he was
guy.
like, officially locked in on the ballot. So he's pulled out. There's now, some names are emerging to possibly replace him on the ballot. Jared Golden, who we cover on this.
But he hasn't expressed interest, has he?
No, he said he doesn't want it.
Yeah, I don't think he's
but
gonna
I
do
think he would be a really interesting candidate. Coincidentally, somebody who is a big Democrat and a very famous person, Patrick Dempsey, has been sort of all of a sudden floated in the conversation.
But he's not gonna do it.
So he wrote a big op-ed about this last week.
Okay.
And a lot of people are saying, Dempsey is like emerging as a really interesting person. Another name who's sort of probably the biggest safe option is Troy Jackson, who's the former president of the Maine Senate. He's longtime Maine person and a lot of political history with him. And he's kind of a progressive, but also like this rural blue collar guy.
Very progressive, though. I mean, he was like a big Plattner supporter, actually.
Yeah. The other person who I'm so excited to see if he emerges is Jordan Wood, who we recently
he
interviewed.
officially is running. And I will say what I love. I mean, you guys should go listen to our conversation with Jordan Wood if you haven't.
It was great.
But he ran to replace Jared Golden in the congressional district. He lost the Democratic primary, but by the way, like a couple thousand votes. Like, you should look at that race if you want to think about your vote doesn't matter, because it definitely does.
Totally.
But obviously we're proponents of Jordan because he's a young person running for office. I also think there's something really interesting about him, which is like his straddling of kind of like the old guard Maine and the new generation of Mainers. Maine is actually age-wise the oldest state in the country. But you also have like this huge tourism economy there that we talked about in our interview. And I just think that, I don't know, I mean, us, like we just love when young people put themselves in the race. And interestingly, Jordan actually was running for Senate before.
Right.
And then when Plattner came in and sort of took everything by storm, as Jordan expressed in our interview with him, he said, I realized that Graham Plattner and I had very similar policy positions. I wasn't going to like try to come in there and be a spoiler in that race. So he switched to running for a congressional district, which I thought was really interesting and mature. But with that said, he agrees with all the reasons that people liked Plattner, which were his policy positions.
Right.
But definitely doesn't come with all of the horrible towards women baggage, because Jordan's also gay. So
well, I think that David Axelrod, obviously famous strategist and commentator now, made a really good point last week where he tweeted out something and he said, and I'm paraphrasing here, everybody's asking, rightfully, how did Graham Plattner get this far with this kind of baggage and background. But he went on to say that I think a bigger question Democrats need to start asking is, what about Plattner's message was so resonating that got him as far as it did? And I
And
think,
got
like,
him like over the hurdles of several other scandals that people
yes,
seemed to kind of
right.
not care as much about. Yeah.
Right. And, you know, it's important to point out that Kamala Harris in 2024 won Maine by 7 points. Susan Collins is very unpopular there. And I think, like, what Plattner was able to speak about, and I think that this is also something that Jordan Wood has spoken about, is this idea of, you know, this need for changing the establishment political ruling class. The people like Susan Collins who are bipartisan when it doesn't matter, you know, and like, you know, they've been there for a while. They're sort of old and stale. And I thought what was interesting, just a sort of final point on this Maine race, is CNN was showing some polls how actually it got to the point now where, with Plattner as the nominee, Democrats were losing to Susan Collins. And when they looked at polling just recently now with Plattner dropping out, a more generic Democrat was totally eclipsing Susan Collins in the polls. So I think that obviously whoever got to Plattner and said, "Listen, you got to do this," like, for for no other reason than political, all of a sudden, you know, now I think the Collins campaign is concerned because she does not match up well against
Whoever
many
else.
generic Democrats.
Whoever
Now,
else, whatever Democrat is in there that
yeah,
isn't a bad person, basically.
never count Susan Collins out,
That's
however.
true. That's
If
true.
all
Well,
right,
shall
where
we
to
move
next?
to the other northernmost state of the United States, to Alaska?
Yes. Drill,
Um,
baby, drill.
so, in Alaska, we have the incumbent Republican Senator Dan Sullivan, who was elected in 2025, seeking re-election, and he is running against former Representative Mary oh, wait, I can never say her
Peltola.
name. Peltola. I always want to say Pelota, which is not
Pelota,
correct.
which is ball in Spanish.
Which is
right?
ball in Spanish, which I've been learning because we've been watching the World Cup on Telemundo recently.
Ole.
So what's interesting about this race is that Mary Peltola, she was a very brief serving representative because she won a special election and then lost in 2022 and then lost her seat in 2024. So she had this very short time in Congress, but she was able to build this reputation in Alaska because her race got a ton of statewide and nationwide attention for that special election. And the other thing to note here is that part of why she actually won that election is because Alaska, like Maine, has ranked choice voting, which I've said before on this show, and I will say again, if you don't know what ranked choice voting is, go look it up. It's what we should be doing in every election because it allows newer candidates to emerge and it forces candidates to not be so partisan, which I think we all would like.
Love that.
Anyway, this primary is going to be held on August 18th. And basically, those are going to be probably the two candidates that come out of it. But the top 4 candidates will advance to a general election on November 3rd to do the ranked choice voting thing. So, you know, it's the polling is sort of, this is a really close race. Basically, obviously, Dan Sullivan has incumbency. Alaska is a really specific political market. Like, you need to look no further than Lisa Murkowski, who I think is one of the most confusing members of the Senate, I would say, in a lot of ways. But it's like very genuinely in play. There are certain research polling that show Peltola up by 5 to 6 points, but then there's some that are a little bit closer. And I think that this is going to test if like the messaging and campaign that Peltola had in 2022 can resonate on a statewide level and still be effective now in 2026.
Yeah.
And, you know,
Well,
I think, okay, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I would add that Maine is a must win for Democrats. They they really can't get control without Maine. And I think that Alaska is a really great pickup opportunity for Democrats. I think that you're absolutely right. Peltola is ahead in a handful of polls. I think she's got a really good shot. And this is, again, I think a pickup that Democrats would very much like, and they have a good chance at it.
Mhm. Yeah, I would say that that's the case. And how about two female senators from different parties representing the state of Alaska?
I
love
think it's
that.
great. Yeah, I think
love
it's
it.
great. And
Real-
by the way, like, of all the states that would do that, Alaska would be
know.
like the last I would
Totally.
predict.
Absolutely.
Well, another possible state that would have potentially two female senators would be Michigan. Currently has Alyssa Slotkin, and we spoke last week, so I don't want to dwell on it too much, about Mallory McMorrow dropping out, leaving Haley Stevens and Dr. Abdul El Sayed.
Or as we call him, Dr. Abdul.
Dr. Abdul.
Which no one else calls him, but Anthony started calling him.
What's interesting about Michigan, and I think, like, this is decidedly a dead heat toss-up between the two of them. And I think that Mike Rogers, Republican, running there will certainly make this competitive. But just speaking on the Democratic primary side of things, they had the debate last week. There's a lot of internet trolling going on with Haley Stevens. She's getting really dragged. The polling really is just kind of dead even with the two of them. And what's interesting is that there is this sort of big social media groundswell going on for Dr. Abdul. But a lot of the political pundits and political reading that I have been looking at have cautioned to don't let social media get you too hyped right now. Haley Stevens is very well liked by auto unions
and very well known in Michigan.
Well known,
yeah.
Yes, and it's funny because the pro Dr. Abdul and Twitter sphere and Instagram social media machine was really kind of making fun of her a little bit and hitting the accent a little bit. That's you don't want to mess with that because she is decidedly Michigan. She is, and that is the accent. And so all of a sudden that kind of stuff, if you sort of start to poke too much at the speech and the cadence of things, all of a sudden Michiganders rally together and say, now, wait a minute, that's, that's our girl. So I say all that to caution people. I think this is a dead heat race. And whoever it is, again, we'll see if the progressive message is going to take hold there and if that can carry Democrats. But Democrats need to win Michigan. It's currently a Democratic held Senate seat right now. So they have to keep that seat if they want to retain. Or not retain if they want to win control.
Right. Another Democratic held seat that needs to be retained is none other than my future mistress, Jon Ossoff.
Ah, yes.
And so in Georgia, Democratic Senator Jon Ossoff is running against GOP Representative Mike Collins, who defeated Derek Dooley. So Dooley was more of the moderate candidate who had actually been backed by Governor Brian Kemp, who was actually also seen as a potential Senate run, but he decided not to. Trump endorsed Mike Collins, who's a much more far-right MAGA figure. And so whatever that's going to mean for Jon Ossoff, we will see. But very similar to Michigan, this is a very, very close race. There are some polls that show Ossoff up by 4 points, but that's not a lot, And so this is one of two Senate seats that, so the Michigan one, Gary Peters is retiring, right? So that's an open seat. This one and Iowa, which I'm going to talk about shortly, are the two.
And New Hampshire.
Is New Hampshire also currently represented by a Democrat?
Jeanne Shaheen is retiring.
No, but I'm saying this is not retiring. This is the Democratic senator is defending their seat to remain in office.
Got it. I see.
Yes.
Right. Okay.
So basically, Jon Ossoff is defending his seat, and he has to remain in office in order for. I mean, it's funny because all of these are must wins, right? For either party, So, but they're must wins in different ways. And I think that the notable thing is that Jon Ossoff became this sort of national sensation when he had a failed congressional campaign. but then eventually had the successful Senate campaign in 2021. He defeated David Perdue by just over a point. So that tells you
Wow.
how close things are. And he is in a state that Trump won. So there are very few states where there's a Democratic senator defending a seat in a state where Trump won, and this is one of them. And then, as we've talked about ad nauseum, because we talk about him all the time, because I'm obsessed with him, Jon Ossoff is being floated as a 2028 potential presidential candidate, although he has said that he's
Loved
not
how you
interested.
did a little hair flip with that too. You're like, he's floated.
Just
as,
Jon.
Okay,
no.
we get it, Anna.
Don't tell Billy. So anyway, he says he's not interested, but I think that, like, I just wanted to say before we move on that if Jon Ossoff does not win this race, he will not run for president. And I think if he does, then he will.
He will. Oh.
So
I think you're right. I think you're right.
No one wants a failed senator to be the candidate for president. But he's gaining so much momentum on the national stage right now that if he does win, I then think that that momentum will be carried into a presidential candidacy. So if you think that hotties like Jon Ossoff should be in higher office like I do, then maybe you want him to win so that he'll run for president and you can keep seeing him give speeches with his shirt's sleeves like cuffed up and, you know.
Yeah. Okay, next, let's go to...
I feel like we're doing that thing where you like spin the globe and like put your finger.
Yeah. Let's go to New Hampshire because I think this is a fun one. And we have our boy Chris Pappas, who is in the running here. And this is another real race. Jeanne Shaheen, Democratic senator, long time, is not running again, retiring. John Sununu, the brother of former governor Chris Sununu, is running as a Republican. Democratic Congressman Chris Pappas is running as a Democrat. They still have a primary coming up, so that'll ultimately decide who the nominee is. But this one is interesting because New Hampshire is obviously a very critical state in terms of it going first as the New Hampshire primary. Or I know that's sort of changed a little bit lately, but it's,
it's always been an important state politically.
Always important state politically. It has a Democratic senator who's retiring. So again, this is a, must hold for Democrats if they want to get control. And the polling is pretty close on this. They've got Pappas up in the primary polling, suggesting that he's the clear favorite as far as getting the Democratic nominee. But then, Sununu is a big name in politics, and I think that the Pappas Sununu matchup is a very close one. What do you think?
Both of them, I feel. I mean, I don't know as much about John Sununu, but I think people obviously know about Governor Sununu. I can't say Sununu without like wanting to laugh.
I know.
I just like what a name.
Sununu. And it's also spelled kind of like goofy too. It's like,
isn't it spelled like it sounds?
Yeah, it's like UNUNU.
Sununu. Yeah,
Sununu.
Yeah. It sounds like something you would like call your dog as like a pet name or something. Like Sununu. Yeah. Anyway. I think that what's interesting about those two is, so we covered Chris Pappas for a long time. He sort of aged out of our coverage and he turned over 45. But Chris Pappas is a very, I would say, he's not like a rabble rouser, And I think that maybe speaks to when we look at the distinctions of different state politics, because I would imagine that neither is Sununu, because his brother, who was governor, was a very moderate governor and, built a profile on sort of like being reasonable and has continued to be in many ways. And so it's interesting because I think if we see the two of them go head to head, I don't want to use the word moderate because I think Chris Pappas does have some policies that are maybe a little bit more progressive, but like just from a demeanor standpoint, I think we will see a race that almost would like remind people of like the good old days of politics, like two respectful men, white men. Chris Pappas is gay, so that, brings him into the 21st century a little bit. But like, having a substantive debate without screaming at each other. Do you know what I'm trying to say?
Yeah.
Like,
Speaking of
that
aging out of our platform, have you aged out of our platform using words like rabble rouser? um, like anyway,
you don't like it?
I love it.
Do you want me to remind people how many years you have until you age out? Or
Nope. 5. It's 5. Maybe 4.5. Well,
moving on.
That is an important
That's
one.
New Hampshire. Okay, well, here's an exciting one for Democrats. North Carolina.
Ooh, okay.
And so this is an open seat being left by Senator Thom Tillis, who I feel like has been in the news a lot.
But you mean Thom? Thom Tillis?
Mr. Thom Tillis.
Yeah. He spells his name weird, listener.
You've never seen a Tom spell his name like that?
No, never.
Really?
Actually, Tom Brown. It's like I feel like it's a weird. Tom is T-O-N.
Kind of an old. I don't know.
Yeah.
I feel like I've known a couple Toms.
Thom.
So Thom Tillis is retiring. I think he's retiring because he's fucking sick of being in politics. He's a Republican senator who clearly doesn't like Trump, and ever since he announced he's retiring, he's been like holding up nominations of the Trump administration. He's been basically trying to like fuck everything up for Trump in the Senate, which is sort of funny to watch.
Yeah.
Now,
I have a question for you about that.
Okay. Well, do you want to ask me that now, or do you want me to continue?
No, continue.
So Thom Tillis is leaving his seat, and he now vying to replace him are going to be Roy Cooper, who is the former governor of North Carolina,
and a popular governor,
very popular governor. And the former RNC chair, Michael Whatley, I think. And so this is a race where Roy Cooper has consistently been leading, and his lead has been growing. A May Carolina Journal poll, which I apologize, I don't know what that is, but it's a poll, had Cooper up 49.8 to 38.7, an 11-point lead that widened. Oh, I'm sorry. I can't read today. A Carolina Journal poll, which is obviously a newspaper, the Carolina Journal. Sorry, everybody.
You don't get it? You're not a subscriber?
Weird. But the poll happened in May. I was reading the May Carolina Journal. Anyway, the poll happened in May. Cooper got 49.8 to Whatley's 38.7. And that was—
I think it's
Whatley, I'm sorry. That was an 11-point lead that widened from a 7.8-point lead just back in March. So in 2 months, the lead in that poll widened basically 3 points. Okay. And so now, like, Cooper just keeps coming up as polling much better, but we all know you can't really listen to polls these days.
Yeah.
But the race has moved from a toss-up to lean Democrat. And this would be, to be clear, as much as Thom Tillis doesn't like Trump, this would be a very big pickup for Democrats if they can win it, which it seems like they might, because we also have to remember he was a popular governor. It's a statewide election. North Carolina generally has been moving more to a purple, if not very like blue state. And so this is, it's, I think, a race where Democrats should be looking of like, how is Cooper doing this? Why is he successful at it? Is it something that can be replicated in other Southern, Midwestern states? The other last thing I wanted to note is that in grassroots fundraising, Cooper has over $13.8 million in Q1 of this year, with more than 95% of his donations under $100. Even though Whatley has more money than him, Cooper has way, way more donors. So to our conversation last week with Nico Agosta of Stalking the Capitol and the Political Integrity Pledge, like, money matters, but also the number of voters who believe in you could matter more. And so that might be telling in this race.
Well, it's definitely a race that Democrats should be going on offense for. And the question I wanted to ask you, and it kind of, I think, encompasses all of these races with the Senate. Do you know what's happening this week? Interim acting attorney general Todd Blanche is having his confirmation hearing to become the actual Senate confirmed attorney general. And I think this is something that I am really watching the Thom Tillises of, the Bill Cassidy's, all of these people who gave Trump the benefit of the doubt with these early cabinet appointment confirmations. I'm thinking, of course, RFK Jr., very controversial. Pete Hegseth, very controversial. The list goes on. And all these people all these senators who at the last minute gave in to Trump and then came to regret that confirmation.
Mhm.
And I am very interested to see how this sort of thing is going to play into the race. Do we think Todd Blanche is going to make it through a Senate confirmation? And are there going to be enough of these handful of senators like a Susan Collins up in Maine who's hanging on for dear life? How is that going to play in a place like North Carolina?
Right. Interesting.
So that I think is something very interesting to watch. Are these, now that we are really getting to the midterms, it's so clear that Trump doesn't give a shit about the midterms.
Right.
He doesn't care about helping any of these people. Will these senators now start to take a more conservative, for lack of a better word, approach to some of these upcoming Senate matters?
Interesting.
And obviously now without Lindsey Graham in the Senate, without Mitch McConnell voting, because that proof of life, we obviously hope he's
Lindsey Graham's sister will be voting.
Well, right, I guess, and she'll likely vote,
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
So let's move quickly to what I think is a real reach for Democrats, but certainly in play, and that's Ohio. Former Senator Sherrod Brown, who lost to a guy, Bernie Moreno, last go around. Obviously, Ohio has drifted very Republican, but is starting to drift back. Sherrod Brown, longtime Ohio figure in politics, very well liked. I frankly thought it was surprising that he lost to Bernie Moreno when he did, but I think that was more of just a sign of the times and the sentiment. He is, I'm looking for my notes here. I don't, where is Ohio? He's running against a guy, a Republican, John Husted. So that'll be interesting. I'm looking
Michael
here
lost
at
his train of thought.
a lot of money going into this race.
So well researched.
I think it leans Republican, but we'll see. The polling is very close. Close.
That's enlightening. But I do think that what's notable about Ohio is what you said, which is that it has been drifting right in the way that North Carolina has been drifting left,
and they have a well-liked governor who's very, conservative but moderate, I think, Mike DeWine.
But Bernie Moreno is not moderate. Bernie Moreno, who beat Sherrod Brown, is very MAGA, very Trumpy, very right. And so this John Husted guy, what's the deal with him? Is he very right? Is he more moderate? Do you need a second to look that up because you maybe didn't get all the research you needed to get on Ohio?
Listen, no. So he is a senator in Ohio, and he was replaced. He replaced J.D. Vance.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
So when Vance became the old vice president, they threw this guy in. So I don't actually think he was a lieutenant governor, and a Ohio Secretary of State. So he was, I don't believe he has won. Maybe he won the Senate race. Maybe he won the Senate. I think he was appointed.
He was appointed.
Yeah. And so he's actually
now he's got to run.
Yeah, he hasn't won a Senate race, so it's interesting. Okay, he's
I will also say that Sherrod Brown is if anyone listening hasn't heard him speak,
he's got real
his voice is. It sounds like that. It's this kind of crazy, gravelly voice. Which take it or leave it.
Fun fact: I met him in the Brentwood Country Mart one time, and somebody walking, I was like chatting with him because he had a BlackBerry. And I was like, oh, wow, he's still got a BlackBerry, Senator. And somebody walked by and asked for a photo with him. And I took the photo of this person and Senator Sherry
Amazing
Brown.
story. Almost as
Yeah. And
amazing as
then,
your research on Johnny Houston.
yeah. Yeah. Listen, Iowa's a toss up. Don't, we'll see. Let's hope. All right.
Okay, moving on to Iowa. So Iowa is another open seat that is being vacated by a Republican. Joni Ernst announced that she would not seek re-election. And we've discussed this race a little bit, so I won't go too deep into it. But essentially, Representative Ashley Hinson, who we've covered ever since she was elected.
Yes,
she's
we
a
have fellow
former-
Trojan.
She went to
USC,
USC.
fight on.
She was a broadcast journalist in Iowa. And she has officially won the GOP nomination. She was backed by Trump. She was backed by Ernst. So she really, had all of the weight behind her. And she is running against State Representative Josh Turek, who we briefly touched on the other week when we talked about this race. And he won the Democratic primary, defeating another state senator, Zach Walz, who people kind of thought was going to win because Walz had really built this national profile. You may remember there was this viral video of a young guy in 2011 doing testimony at I believe it was the Iowa State Senator State House, about having two moms. And it was in defending same-sex parents and everything that was going down in that era after the Obergefell ruling. Obergefell?
Obergefell.
You guys know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And anyway, so he had really built this national profile. He ran successfully for state office. People kind of thought that he was going to ride that wave, but Josh Turek swooped in and said, no, I'm going to be the better Democratic candidate here. And his background is pretty impressive. If you didn't catch our episode about Ashley Hinson, you may not have heard that he is a former Paralympian. And although he's a relative newcomer to office, he definitely has a vibe that I think people are responding to. And Michael will be happy that I'm mentioning this because he loves talking about tariffs. And as much as Iowa has been a Republican state, there is this little thing called farming that is very popular in Iowa and a way that a lot of people in Iowa make their money. And the tariffs have hit farmers, as we know, very, very hard. And so as Joni Ernst steps aside, this is the first genuinely competitive race for senator in over a decade because of some of the Trump policies that have affected rural America and farmers, which, as I said, include tariffs, but also include cuts to the Affordable Care Act subsidies, cuts to funding for rural hospitals as a result of that, and such. So this is a really important one to watch. Currently, Democrats are kind of edging out Republicans, but I think given that we just saw the primaries happen, that could change a little bit. But if a Democrat does win this state, people should know, not only would that be huge because Democrats won a Republican state, but it would be huge because of why they won it, which means that Trump's policies were very unpopular with a lot of Republican and independent voters there.
And also consider, we were talking about New Hampshire. Iowa is a huge part of the presidential primary process, the Iowa caucus. And I think you're absolutely right that this will be a real weather vane as far as what are the issues resonating with voters. And I think that clearly, this is showing just how unpopular and how up for grabs this state is by the fact that Trump made a recent trip there. And, I think it's important. The tell is, okay, where's the money going? What are they really worried about? Where do they think they have a chance? And where are they doing damage control?
Yeah.
And I want to finally wrap this up with the great old big ass state of Texas, where I think
this is such a spicy race.
We have a Senate race, playlisters. I mean, we've got Attorney General Republican Ken Paxton and Democratic State Rep James Tallarico are kind of neck in the polls. It's 43-42 Paxton to Tallarico. And I have a lot of mixed emotions on this race. We've as far as where I think it's going to go, and I'm curious your thoughts.
I was
You
like,
know
oh, you're a big Ken Paxton fan. I didn't
what?
know.
Well, no. In fact, I will
Do you
say that I
also like
think
traveling to England with your mistress on America's 250th
I think
birthday?
Ken Paxton is one of the great pieces of shit currently in American politics.
Seriously.
My question is, do you think Texas is so big and so Republican that it doesn't matter how big of a piece of shit Ken Paxton is?
Well, I think what's being shown is that yes, to an extent, because they're so
Yeah.
even.
Yeah.
And I think that, even when you had a surge of a candidate like Beto O'Rourke, like he never really was going to beat Ted Cruz.
Right.
Like it was
Right.
like, oh, there's all this fanfare, there's all this stuff, like, but still it's Texas. So I think that then if you're like, okay, well, Ken Paxton like clearly is just like such scum. And I say this as someone who really does believe in like good Republican candidates. Like this isn't sort of just like a wash on all
Like
Republicans.
Ashley Hinson, great Republican candidate.
Yeah, she's a good
Yeah.
Republican candidate, right?
Yeah.
So like, but Ken Paxton is just so terrible and like has so many problems, has been charged with corruption that was then like vacated by, it was like the state legislature, which was controlled by the Republicans, actually charged him with corruption. And then it ended up like not going all the way. So he never actually had to pay any penance for it.
Abbott and Trump got involved
Sure.
and they started like,
So like this guy is like a bad guy. And the fact that James Tallarico, who, whatever your political opinions are, who does seem like a good person, is still neck and neck with him, I think does show that Texas is so big and so red. However, the fact that he's neck and neck with him also shows that there is something maybe brewing. And I guess I would also relate this to what you said about Michigan, though, which is that Tallarico obviously surged nationally because of social media.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that what we're seeing is that doesn't matter as much as people might think it does. And so I think it's really up to Tallarico to like, know his state, I guess would be the thing. I don't know Texas so well, like, but he better, because I think that's going to be the only way to effectively campaign.
I think that, the political pundits and the campaign strategists say Tallarico has to consolidate the black vote in Texas, which I think is a little torn on him, given that, he ran against Jasmine Crockett, which
very charged primary.
Very charged primary. And Colin Allred, who ran for Senate and lost, definitely was flirting with entering this race and was kind of boxed out a little bit. So I think he's got a little work to do there. And I think he has to pick up a little bit more of the Hispanic vote. And I think this is a really winnable race for him. I think as much as Democrats want to caution themselves not to get too hyped with Texas, I do really think that this is winnable. And I think that ultimately, the great irony here is that had Trump not let his ego get in the way of just giving his endorsement to John Cornyn, this would be a shoo-in for Republicans. And now, because Trump's ego wouldn't let him endorse Cornyn, even though Cornyn then, came and bent the knee and kissed the ring, Trump still had to stick it to him and nominate Paxton. And I think that ultimately there's going to be enough money that goes in this race that whatever anti-ads they're going to run against Tallarico, the ones against Paxton are going to be salient enough to that small little section.
Hopefully.
That's going to. So my bet, calling it right now, I think Tallarico wins.
I wanted to add that I heard this really interesting interview with Jasmine Crockett because she was getting criticism of like, why aren't you on stage with Tallarico, like, showing your support, so that exactly what you said, that there can be sort of this consolidation of African Americans in Texas around Tallarico. And her response I thought was really interesting and intelligent, which is she said, I don't need to be up on stage with him. What I'm trying to do is boost Black state representatives or candidates who are running for state and local office, because what that will do is turn out the vote of African American voters in Texas. And if you get people turned out to vote, then they will vote their whole ballot. And I thought that was really interesting. And I think that like she's drawn so much criticism for trying to create division after the race and whatever. And however you feel about that, I think it's important to note that like what she said is a real strategy, is saying, hey, if you have a mayor on your ballot or you have a state representative on your ballot who is Black, I am using my profile to make that person more notable, to get them more money so that they will force you to turn out to vote. And then when you go to fill in your ballot because you want to vote for that Black mayor, you are also going to vote for James Tallarico because you are a Democrat. And so that voter turnout that I think she is speaking to is going to be a really big part of it. And I thought that was just a really great response to a valid criticism of like, why aren't you on stage with Tallarico? And so I just thought that was worth mentioning because I think it's a very real thing, is you just want to get people to the polls and to filling out their ballots.
Yeah, that is really interesting. And I think like that still feels a little salty. Like,
It's a little salty and sidesteppy,
Yeah.
but it's also like,
yeah,
like if you're going to feel salty about the way the race was run, which I think she does,
yeah.
whether that's valid or not, like at least she's not just on social
Sitting
media
it
like
out.
bashing
Right,
Tallarico.
right.
She's saying, I'm going to try to help in a different way that suits my personality and the power that
Mhm.
I have. And I respect that.
Also, I think it's worth noting that the Texas primaries saw about $122 million spent in advertising. It was became the most money spent on a Senate primary in the history of the country, and they're expecting the general election will go beyond 200 million.
Wow.
So clearly, this is a big thing, and I think we've talked about it a little bit that the Republicans really have a war chest of cash
Mhm.
on
Mhm.
hand. The Democrats less so.
Mhm.
And this is the challenge that, again, the sort of, can't get out of his own way in Trump, is that Trump now just costs the Republican Party writ large millions and millions of dollars that they now have to allocate to Texas, which means less money they can allocate to Georgia, less
Mhm.
money they can allocate to Maine, Alaska, all the 9 states we talked about. And push comes to shove, like, yeah, okay, if they have to divert $100 million to Texas and somehow Ken Paxton manages to get this seat by half a point, well, okay, they held Texas, but that was $100 million that weren't able to be spent in these other places, which could really be the difference in the race. So,
Or even worse, they spend it and it doesn't work.
or they spend it and it doesn't work. And then it
Yeah.
goes back to that question of, oh, wow, so we're fine spending $100 million on a Texas race, but we can't help feed kids,
Totally.
Like, I mean, it's just Christ.
As we just to wrap things up officially, I just wanted to shout out really quickly. I think that a lot of the time, people who can be cynical about politics, which is a vast majority of Americans, are
Mhm.
like, okay, well, it's all like this game. And, there's this kind of racehorse vibe to it. And I think the episode that we just did here had a little bit of that. It is a little bit of kind
There's
of,
a little inside baseball.
jockeying,
Yeah,
inside baseball.
yeah.
But what I want to just clarify is this is what control of the Senate means. The party that controls the Senate is committee chairs, which means that they control the agenda. So the majority party chairs every single committee in the Senate and controls what gets a hearing or a vote and sets the schedule of the Senate floor. So whatever bills want to be put into law, that is at control of the majority party. They can hold up any bills that they don't like and not get a vote on them. They can push through bills that they think they can get through, even if maybe a lot of Americans are against them. Michael touched on this a little bit, confirmations. The
Yep.
Senate alone, it is the
Major.
only body in our government that confirms federal judges, including, importantly, Supreme Court vacancies, of which we are about to see one with Justice Alito, cabinet officials, and other executive nominees. You mentioned Todd Blanche. There might be more turnover within the Trump administration of people in his cabinet or other people in the executive position, in the executive branch who need confirmation. And that confirmation vote only needs a simple majority. So if Democrats manage to get the Senate by 1 seat or 2 seats, they can have a field day with forcing certain things to be happening within the executive branch, Or on the flip side, if Republicans retain by 1 or 2 seats, then they will be able to essentially allow Trump to keep putting in, presumably, who he wants to put in, like a Todd Blanche. Similar to the agenda control, they controlled legislation. The majority controls what bills reach the floor. Although in the Senate, as we have maybe heard of if you're following the news, most legislation does need 60 votes in the Senate to overcome the filibuster, which current Majority Leader John Thune seems like he will not break the filibuster. I would imagine that if the Democrats get the Senate, I don't think that you're going to have a majority leader on the Democratic side who will want to break the filibuster. And personally, I think that's a good thing. It's like the only thing keeping this train on the
Right.
tracks right now.
Right.
The only exception to that is budget reconciliation bills. So any bill that has to do with the budget or money can be put to a simple majority. But the reality is whichever party has the majority decides what legislation is coming up for a vote. And then the last thing, which I think is going to be really important, not in the next 2 years, but potentially in 2028, is that committee chairs, the majority party, controls subpoena power and the direction of investigation into the executive branch. We're already hearing a lot of talk about the Democrats who are lining up to investigate corruption from the Trump administration, just as there are Republicans lining up to investigate the Biden administration. And so if Democrats can control the Senate in 2026, they could even start to do some of that subpoenaing now before Trump even leaves office. So those are the real implications of like the horse race of it all. And so whether you like the horse race or whether you actually just like want government to function better, whoever's in control of the Senate does really matter.
Yeah. Well, playlisters, if you've made it this far, we've had a long one, but we hope an informative one.
Cheers.
Thank you for listening. Cheers, Anna.
And if you like what you hear every week, please follow or subscribe. Leave us a review, 5 stars only, please. Maybe 4 if you are annoyed that this was a long episode. That's fine. But we really like to hear from you guys, and we hope that you will follow along